Black Square by Kazimir Malevich remains one of the most discussed and almost mystified works in the world. However, Kazimir Severnovich Malevich is far more than just the Black Square. He is an artist, theorist, philosopher, teacher, and creator of a new direction in art. The spectrum of his work was so vast that Malevich not only made a significant contribution to practically every sphere of applied art, but also left a large legacy in the form of theoretical works. He spoke in a new graphic language. But what exactly is the Black Square? Is it the death of art, irony, or a pivotal work that radically transformed art? Debates about this painting continue to this day. Some believe it is the greatest artwork with profound meaning, while others feel a sense of rejection and confusion. Let's attempt to dissect Malevich's work and understand what makes this painting, which has intrigued people for over a century, so unique. To understand the reasons behind the creation of the Black Square, we need to mentally travel back to the 19th century. Why this era? In 1822, photography was invented. Previously, artists aimed to accurately depict reality or create an illusion of it, but now there was no need. A click of the camera and the landscape, portrait, or still life was captured. What was an artist to do? Artists began seeking new artistic solutions, focusing on the essence of painting, capturing states and impressions, hence Impressionism, from the French impression meaning impression. Various isms emerged: Fauvism, Cubism, Cubo-Futurism, Surrealism, and so on. Artists gradually moved towards either complexity or extreme simplification of form. Malevich marked the culmination of this evolution in form. This point was Suprematism, from the Latin supremus, meaning highest, superior. Further development of art beyond this new direction was not anticipated. In this way, Malevich introduced non-objectivity into art. Impressionists attempted to convey the impression of the real world. Cubists deconstructed objects into separate facets. Malevich, however, moved away from the real object, leaving only color. The first hint of the Black Square appeared in the set design for the futurist opera Victory Over the Sun, created by Mikhail Matyushin and Alexei Kruchenik. The opera's heroes aimed to conquer the sun. In the finale, a black square eclipsed the solar disk as a symbol of humanity's triumph over nature. Victory Over the Sun became an example and symbol of the synthesis of arts, literary, musical, and visual, and was entirely built on their illogicality. The plot of the opera tells of strongmen from the future who set out to conquer the sun. This is usually understood as the victory of advanced future technology over old nature. But it is also a kind of metaphor that speaks of the victories of avant-garde innovators over the usual understanding of things, that is, a kind of victory of futurists over Pushkin, the son of Russian poetry, whom they diligently tried to overthrow from the ship of modernity. Mikhail Matyushin himself described the idea of the production as, "The opera has a deep internal content, mocking the old romanticism and empty rhetoric. The entire Victory Over the Sun is a victory over the old familiar concept of the sun as beauty." The performance broke and changed all possible laws of time and space, and not only in its plot. The authors of Victory Over the Sun sang and manifested the idea of building a new future, believing that it could be built only after the destruction of the old. And each of the creators achieved this by their own means. Malevich with suprematist constructions, Kruchenik with Zom, transrational language, and Matyushin with the dissonance of musical fabric. The first performance took place in 1913 in St. Petersburg. The second time was in Vitebsk in 1920, and the opera was not revived until the 1980s. The contribution of Malevich as a designer to the play remains the most significant artistic merit of the performance, which is why it entered the history of culture. The work on the production served as a catalyst for the creation of Suprematism. Malevich's Black Square first appeared in the set design for Victory Over the Sun. Act 1, Scene 5. It was an expression of the triumph of active human creativity over the passive form of nature, a black square instead of the solar circle. As with all of Malevich's work, the audience was divided in their reaction during the performance. Some were loudly outraged, while others welcomed the opera. The latter were in the minority. As mentioned, the black square first appeared to the audience as part of the set design in the opera Victory Over the Sun. Various figures were painted in the background, including a large black square. Something deeply moved and shook the artist when he saw his creation. When he removed the backdrop, he painted over what was drawn in white. Thus, a large black square on a vast white canvas was created. Malevich was so struck by his own work that he was bedridden with fever for several days from excitement and realization. This is what he called Suprematism. He brought out the dominance of color and form in one canvas. Another precursor to the black square was composition with the Mona Lisa, 1914, which depicted a crossed-out work by Leonardo da Vinci with black and white rectangles above. Interestingly, Kazimir Malevich crossed out the face and chest of the Mona Lisa, symbols of corporeal ideas. In 1915, the last futurist exhibition of painting 010 opened at the Art Bureau on Mars Field in St. Petersburg, 0 symbolizing the nullification of art, 10 being the number of participants. Artists presented 154 works, showcasing innovative directions of the Russian avant-garde, Suprematism, and Constructivism. Kazimir Malevich curated the exhibition, displaying 39 of his own works. He published a brochure titled From Cubism to Suprematism, explaining the essence of the movement. The most striking impression on visitors was made by a canvas measuring 79.5 by 79.5 centimeters. It hung like an icon in old homes, in the red corner. In this way, Malevich sought to establish a new religion in art, Suprematism. But what drove the choice of the form, square, and color, black? Strictly speaking, it is not quite a square but a quadrilateral. None of its sides are equal or parallel to each other. Malevich chose the square because it is an artificially created figure that cannot be found in nature. Thus, he wanted to assert the idea that the future is man-made. The black color is also not purely black. Malevich applied different paints on top of each other. Chemical analysis showed that 3 homemade paints were used. The first was burnt bone. The second was black ochre. And the third was another natural component of a dark green shade. Malevich dusted everything with chalk to create the illusion of a matte surface. The white color, in this case, expresses the idea of infinite space, the desert of non-being, while black symbolizes the absence of color, emptiness. The artist himself tried to replicate his work about 4 more times, but he confessed that he never managed to capture that energy again, as if looking into an abyss. It was the radiance of form. It was a new artistic alphabet. It is essential to pay attention to the fact that this alphabet had a precedent. This precedent is the ancient Chinese artistic constitution known as Bagua. It dates back to the 3rd millennium BC. It preaches the philosophy of energy and symbolism and states that everything in the world is a union of heaven and earth. Bagua is based on symbolism and a strict graphic alphabet that excludes everything unnecessary, leaving only the sign, the form. This is what Malevich aspired to. It is noteworthy that this philosophy included the figure of a square, which was a sign of the earth. As a square has 4 sides, so does the earth have 4 corners, 4 cardinal directions, 4 seasons. The colors of the earth are yellow and red. The sky is without beginning and infinite, so in geometrical representation, it is thought of as a single infinite line, a circle. The earth, on the other hand, is finite and limited in space. Its symbol is a square. The sky embodies the force of yang, while the earth embodies the force of yin. According to the teachings of the Book of Changes, life, in the broadest sense, is an endless series of metamorphoses resulting from the interaction and struggle of yin and yang, the forces of light and darkness, resilience and pliability, heat and cold. Each possible metamorphosis is conventionally represented by one of the magical sign symbols called Gua. There was also the color white, which, according to this philosophy, represented the beginning of everything. This Chinese philosophy was likely close to Malevich. It is likely that he created his own language with this philosophy in mind. And of course, it cannot be overlooked that in his later theoretical works, he often referred to Taoism. One of the most significant stages in Kazimir Severinovich's artistic and philosophical journey was the study of color form. Even though at the beginning of his research path, many of his conclusions sounded more like provocative manifestos, eventually, through his methodical study of the concepts of color and form, the psychology of their perception, and their influence on human physiology, he arrived at what became the foundation of modern color ergonomics in our everyday life. It is due to his experiments that we can now discuss the influence of different colors on the psychophysiology of people. Based on his conclusions and reflections, certain systems for choosing colors exist in various fields of our activity. For instance, the uniforms of janitors and road workers are bright orange vests necessary for visibility. On the other hand, the walls of hospital wards are painted in calm colors. And of course, it should be noted that the results of his work and research laid the groundwork for the development of modern design. He dedicated a significant number of his theoretical works to architecture. His new, thoughtful perspective on composition and the organization of space eventually influenced the laws of cinematography. One of the most important ideas in his philosophical activity was the departure from form as a sign of internal development. The artist believed that removing everything unnecessary from an image and moving from representationalism to abstraction facilitates understanding or cognition of what he called cosmic excitement, that is, an impulse that is the beginning of everything. Malevich believed that only abstraction could convey those internal states that cannot be described. Conversely, representationalism in imagery distances us from the essence itself. As Malevich said in his work From Cubism and Futurism to Suprematism, the Venus de Milo is a clear example of decline. Michelangelo's David is a monstrosity. The art of naturalism is the idea of the savage, a striving to convey the visible, but not to create a new form. Art as the skill to convey the visible on canvas was considered creativity. His setting a samovar on the table also creativity. I think quite differently. Conveying real things on canvas is the art of skillful reproduction, and nothing more. And there is a great difference between the art of creating and the art of repeating. To create means to live, to forever create new and new things. An artist can be a creator when the forms of his paintings have nothing in common with nature. Reproducing nature is theft, and the one who repeats it is a thief, an entity that cannot give but loves to take and pass off as its own. The artist focused on ways of organizing space and studying and applying the laws of composition. Thanks to these laws, his paintings acquired their meaning and even emotional coloring. Kazimir Severinovich Malevich was one of the first and most significant abstract artists. Abstractionism is an art movement that rejected the depiction of forms close to reality in painting and sculpture. One of the goals of abstractionism is to depict specific color combinations and geometric shapes that evoke a sense of completeness and compositional wholeness in the viewer. In their revolutionary ideas, Malevich and his like-minded peers went so far in breaking the established norms in art that Alexander Benoy, a renowned Russian artist and critic, while reviewing the aforementioned exhibition of the Union of Young Artists, referred to the group of young Muscovites as the avant-garde. He used the term as a metaphor with its militaristic meaning. Nonetheless, he was right, and the term eventually became established. The main aim of the avant-garde as an art movement was to introduce everything new: ideas, views, techniques. Avant-garde artists always chose the path of greatest resistance, tirelessly breaking stereotypes, challenging society, and rejecting everything conventional and accepted. Kazimir Severinovich, staying true to the main idea of the avant-garde, introduced an entirely new direction in art: Suprematism. Suprematism, from Latin supremus, highest, supreme, is an art movement and a method of expressing the structure of the universe in geometric forms such as straight lines, squares, circles, and rectangles. The combination of multicolored and differently sized geometric figures forms balanced asymmetrical suprematist compositions infused with internal movement. Kazimir Severnovich Malevich's creative journey was quite rich and diverse. It began with works created in realism, passed through impressionism, and touched upon symbolism and primitivism. Approaching the avant-garde, the artist transitioned to creating works in styles such as cubism and futurism, merging them into what is known as cubo-futurism. Undoubtedly, the most significant and important stage in art history of his work was Suprematism. At the very beginning of his career, Malevich loved painting from nature. However, he never mindlessly copied everything he saw. He himself said, "Copying nature, taking and painting it just as it is. Well, it's so good as it is. But if you paint it, it won't be interesting. You need to add something." Later in his theoretical works, he described the necessary additional element in art. Following this additional element, he seemed to evolve from one style to another. Impressionism introduced the idea of color as an additional element. Cubism taught about contrasts, and the additional element of suprematism became a sharp focus on the organization of space. For example, if you take one painting from each of the most prominent periods of his work and arrange them in chronological order, for convenience, let's take paintings with relatively similar themes. You can trace the pattern of the additional element. This can be seen in the following paintings: Three Women on the Road from 1900, Impressionism, Women Gathering Flowers from 1908, Symbolism, The Reaper from 1912, Cubism, Lady at the Tram Stop from 1913, Cubo-Futurism, Black Square from 1915. Suprematism. You can trace how the form is simplified, the color becomes purer, and the organization of space more thought out. A particular pattern can also be identified in the themes of his works. As the form cleanses, the theme becomes more industrial, moving towards the city, until suprematism happens, and there is no more plot, only pure color and pure form. Then everything turns back. On the new language of suprematism, the themes of his paintings once again speak of rural motifs. It's worth mentioning that towards the end of his life, Malevich created quite realistic works. However, looking at them, one cannot help but notice the influence of everything the artist experienced and realized during his creative evolution. In his notebook, Malevich once wrote that various leaders, trying to subordinate art to their goals, teach that art can be divided into class distinctions, that there exists bourgeois, religious, peasant, proletarian art. In reality, there is a struggle between two classes. Both sides have art that reflects and aids them. However, new non-objective art serves neither and is unnecessary to them. The main idea of suprematism was not so much the rejection of objectivity, but the transition to the dominance of painting. That is, the meaning of suprematism was to identify the priorities of color and form. Furthermore, its main aspiration was to detach art from any ideology and narrative. This was actually a deeply social motive, which moved in the same direction as the fight against class inequality. Thus, suprematism was meant to unite all views and make the perception of art universal, erase all disputes about ideologies, and make people feel a higher energy. In addition to the concepts of plot, suprematism also erases the boundaries of understanding top and bottom. There is no difference between right and left. There exists only space and a certain graphical language. The meaning of art becomes metaphysical. Suprematism is another aggregate state. Malevich often pondered how this very non-objective universe is structured. Its primary impulse and essence is excitation, a state of rest and simultaneously boiling, burning. This can be more accurately described as a process of calm. For the universe, it is a permanent state. For humans, desirable. It is an ecstasy in which one is equal to the universe, a creative burning. The result of excitation is thought, while thought itself strives to reveal excitation in form. Thus imperfection is born, for excitation has no striving. Thought, however, can manifest in both non-objective and objective forms, and hence differences in weight and other characteristics of the material world can arise. Moreover, Malevich believed that humans are at the core of universal excitation, and the human skull is comparable to this very universe. However, because a person, being at this core, feels on the brink of unraveling a mystery, they reside in fear of the abyss of the unknown. Trying to overcome fear and striving for perfection, a person begins to study and repair. By doing so, they objectify and thereby destroy the mystery, distancing themselves from it. So why is Black Square a masterpiece? Almost every viewer tries to understand Malevich using the familiar language of natural depiction. The same language invented by Giotto and developed by Renaissance artists. A language that describes the surrounding world. Even futurists describe the world. Malevich, however, invented a language that describes nothing. It is the energy of color and form. It is a new language for absolutely new conditions of civilization. Let's look at Malevich's later self-portrait. It's no coincidence he depicts himself as a Renaissance artist. The painting with recognizable facial features is unexpectedly realistic. It refers to Italian Renaissance portraits both in costume, Malevich dressed as a Venetian doge, and in a proud pose and dignified expression. By the way, here too Malevich follows the spirit of the time. In that era, many painters began to work in the style of neoclassicism. However, he does not forget about his suprematist past. In the lower right corner of the canvas, on a neutral background near the lowered hand, Malevich's signature can be found, a tiny black square instead of an autograph. During Malevich's farewell after his death, this portrait hung at the head of his suprematist sarcophagus, next to, of course, the black square. A self-portrait is how an artist perceives themselves. With his portrait, he says, "I am equal to them. I am equal to Giotto. I am equal to Montaigne." He stylizes himself as a 15th century artist. And he is absolutely right. Just like Giotto, just like Montaigne, he was a well-rounded person, a man of his time and a man of the future who led his culture into the future. Many try to evaluate the black square using inappropriate criteria. Like, don't like. Beautiful, not beautiful. Realistic, not realistic. This creates awkwardness, bewilderment, because the black square is indifferent to such assessments. What remains? Only to condemn or ridicule. Scribble, nonsense, I can do that too, and so on. Now evaluate the black square as a letter of the alphabet, as an atom of a molecule, as an electron of a magnetic field. Malevich essentially invented a new pictorial language, appropriate for the upcoming time, which is about to arrive. And a language has its own alphabet. The black square is the main sign of this alphabet. 0 forms, as Malevich said. Before Malevich, there was another alphabet, invented by Giotto at the beginning of the 14th century. This alphabet was the basis of all art. It is perspective, volume, emotional expressiveness. Malevich's language is completely different. Simple color forms where color is endowed with a different role. It is not to convey nature, and not to create the illusion of volume. It is expressive in itself. The black square is the main letter in the new alphabet. A square because it is a primary form. Black color because it absorbs all colors. Along with the black square, Malevich creates the black cross and the black circle. Simple elements, but they are also derivatives of the black square. Then Malevich composes new words from his alphabet. He combines color forms in simple, complex, and very complex combinations. Then it will become clear why this is a masterpiece. It is impossible to evaluate the black square on its own. It is only possible along with the space it serves, Alongside Malevich in painting and sculpture, Marcel Duchamp will find such a 0 point, and in music, John Cage. Write in the comments if you want to learn more about this in a new video. And subscribe to the channel. A lot of interesting things await you.